Eu queria te contar um pouquinho sobre quem é esse cara que você vai ouvir agora. Richard Davidson. Eu sou uma profunda admiradora dele, porque eu acho que ele fala de uma maneira absolutamente simples, mas mais do que isso, porque eu acho que ele é uma pessoa incansável em aproximar espiritualidade e ciência. Essas duas áreas pelas quais eu sou completamente fascinada e que muitas vezes entram em conflito, e se tem alguém no mundo que ajudou essas áreas a conversarem cada vez mais, é o Richard Davidson. O Richard Davidson teve a sorte de conhecer Dalai Lama lá atrás, na década de 90, e começou pela própria sugestão do Dalai Lama a pesquisar os efeitos da meditação no cérebro dos monges tibetanos. Foi muito engraçado porque tem um encontro deles que é memorável, em que Richard Davidson conta, e é possível encontrar essa entrevista dele em alguns lugares no YouTube, em que ele conta que quando eles foram avaliar o cérebro dos monges, eles colocaram uma série de eletrodos na cabeça dos monges, e o Dalai Lama teria perguntado assim: o que vocês estão fazendo? E Richard Davidson teria respondido: nós estamos avaliando os pensamentos, a mente dos monges. E aí Dalai Lama respondeu: mas a mente dos monges fica aqui, no coração. E por própria sugestão do Dalai Lama, como eu disse, o Richard Davidson começou a estudar os efeitos da meditação no cérebro e no corpo, claro, por consequência, porque está tudo interligado. Dalai Lama disse assim: vocês cientistas estudam os efeitos das emoções negativas, efeitos da ansiedade, efeitos da depressão. Por que vocês não passam a estudar os efeitos da bondade, da empatia e da compaixão? Então, Richard Davidson pegou aquela provocação. Com isso, ele fundou o Centro de Investigação de Mentes Saudáveis da Universidade de Wisconsin. Ele é PhD em neuropsicologia e um pesquisador muito, muito sério na área de neurociência afetiva. Os estudos do Richard Davidson hoje são conhecidos no mundo inteiro, e ele tem feito um trabalho brilhante para que crianças do mundo todo tenham contato com o que a gente chama hoje de habilidades socioemocionais. Então prepare-se para essa entrevista que você vai ver agora e aproveite! The first questions I would like to ask you is, what meditation can do to our brain?
Well, meditation will influence the brain in different ways, and part of it depends upon the particular type of meditation. There are many different kinds of meditation, and so it's important that we not think that all meditation has the same effect on the brain. Having said that, there are some broad things that we can say. One is that circuits that are important for attention are impacted by meditation. And the second is that circuits that are important for the regulation of emotion are also impacted by most forms of meditation. More specific than that requires that we specify what kind of meditation we're talking about. So, for example, compassion and loving kindness meditation has effects on circuits that are important in empathy and emotion, whereas mindfulness practices have effects on attention circuits particularly. And so there are important differences among different kinds of meditation.
We interview some people who suffer from chronic pain and depression. What do you think is the most impressive things that science has discovered about that and meditation?
I would say two things. One is that with regard to pain, there is good research indicating that simple forms of mindfulness meditation can decrease the suffering that we experience from pain, primarily by altering the extent to which pain circuits are activated when we anticipate pain. And so by decreasing the activation of pain networks during the anticipation and recovery phases, these practices can decrease the overall amount of suffering. So that's one important thing. So there's good evidence to suggest that mindfulness-based practices, particularly mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, can be very effective in decreasing the probability of relapse among patients with depression. Depression is a recurring illness, so the strongest predictor of whether someone is going to have a depressive episode is whether they had a previous depressive episode. It's been found in very good studies that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy can be very effective in minimizing depression relapse.
How can meditation improve our happiness?
Meditation can improve our happiness by strengthening circuits that are important for positive emotion and increasing the extent to which positive emotion is savored, and also by helping to remind us of our innate basic goodness. Scientific research is showing with greater rigor the evidence that we all come into the world with this kind of innate basic goodness. We prefer interactions that are warm-hearted and cooperative and altruistic compared to those that are selfish or aggressive. And there are certain meditation practices which can strengthen that. They impact specific networks of the brain that we know are important in positive emotion and in empathy. And strengthening those networks can improve our well-being and our happiness.
Which part of the brains are that?
Well, it's not any single part of the brain. These are networks that include many different regions, include the insula, the amygdala, the ventral striatum, the temporoparietal junction. Those are all regions that are impacted by these kinds of practices.
And our brains are constantly changing, right?
Yes, this is the idea of neuroplasticity. We are beginning to appreciate its importance more, particularly in humans. And one of the things that is important to recognize is that neuroplasticity is occurring all the time. It's occurring wittingly or unwittingly. It's occurring intentionally or unintentionally. Most of the time it's unwitting or unintentional. Most of the time our brains are being shaped by forces around us which we have little control over and often which we're very much unaware of. And so the invitation in all this work is that we can actually take more responsibility for our own brains and cultivate neuroplasticity in a more intentional way.
E você acha que a meditação é uma das melhores formas de mudar o nosso cérebro?
I do think it's one of the best ways to change our brains because it's so accessible. We don't need any special drug or any instrumentation. All we need is our own mind. And what is amazing is that scientific research has established that we can simply use our own minds to change our brains in ways that can make a positive difference in our lives.
Is it true that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind?
Yes, I do agree with that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Distraction is toxic. The inability to focus our attention, being pulled in multiple directions, it takes a toll on our well-being. And so being able to be fully present, to actually be fully there for whatever is happening in the moment is something that is associated with happiness and well-being.
Tell me about your experience of meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Is that when all of that starts?
It is when much of this began. I first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1992, and he inspired me to begin to use tools of modern neuroscience and bring them to bear on studying positive qualities of the mind, like kindness and compassion. And I've been very fortunate to be able to meet with him on a regular basis. I was just with him in January in India and see him these days 3 or 4 times a year. And he has played a very critical role in inspiring and catalyzing a lot of the research in this area that's now occurring.
You used to say that well-being is a skill, right?
I still say that.
How can we improve our well-being?
We can improve our well-being by taking our personal mental hygiene seriously. We all brush our teeth every day. It's something we recognize is important for our health. Training the mind in this way, reminding ourselves of our innate basic goodness, tapping into the idea that all human beings share the same wish to be happy and to be free of suffering. Those simple things can be enormously helpful in shifting our brains in a way which is oriented toward the good. And if we do that consistently on a regular basis, it begins gradually over time to make a difference that actually endures.
Epigenética também tem a ver com isso, certo?
Well, epigenetics is a part of it, yes. Epigenetics is the science of how genes are regulated. And one of the really interesting insights that has been uncovered over the last few years is that by training our mind in specific ways, we can actually induce epigenetic changes in our gene expression that may be helpful for our physical health as well as for our brain health.
And what are you studying right now, Richard?
Many different things. We have a large center. There are about 85 people working in our center, so we have many different projects going on that range from very basic research in the laboratory, other epigenetic kinds of studies, to looking at the implementation of these kinds of practices in real-world settings. One of the things that's very exciting to us is the opportunity to, through mobile devices, collect data on the qualities that may be impacted by meditation and do it in very large numbers of people who are engaging in these practices, for example, in the workplace.
Do you think we should start as early as we can?
I do think we should start early, and part of the research that we're doing now involves developing age-appropriate curricula for very young children. We are starting at 4 and 5 years of age. We've developed a kindness curriculum for 4 and 5-year-olds that we're deploying now in the public schools and looking at the impact of these practices in kids 4 and 5 years of age. And we've published our first scientific paper on this about a year ago, showing that there's a lot of benefit that can be observed on objective measures in kids this young.
Which benefits, the most important?
I would say the most important are benefits on cooperative and altruistic behavior, which we think is importantly related to bullying. So, for example, kids who go through the kindness curriculum are much more likely to share with other kids, to be kind to other kids, than children who get a standard curriculum.
Eu sei que agora você é um estudioso de compaixão e de outras qualidades boas como bondade, mas acha que a gente tem uma preferência pelas emoções ruins?
Bad emotions? Not at all.
Not at all.
No. Nobody will sign up for a course to learn how to be more fearful. But there are lots of people who sign up for a course to learn how to be happier. So I think there's so much evidence to suggest that we prefer positive emotions of that kind, to me, it's uncontroversial.
And why doctors or neuroscientists have studied for such a long time anxiety and depression and stress, and only nowadays you're looking to these things as compassion and kindness?
In part it's because of some of the suffering that occurs in the world. There's so much suffering, there's so much anxiety, so much depression. So it's not unreasonable that scientists study that to try to learn more about it, what causes it, and ways that it might be alleviated. But we hold the view that well-being is not simply the absence of anxiety and depression. It's something more than that. And so we believe that it should be studied in its own right.
As a neuroscientist, can you tell me, can we totally empty our minds?
I don't think there's any reason why we should empty our minds. And certainly the notion that meditation is associated with emptying our minds is really a misguided idea. Meditation has nothing to do with emptying our minds. Meditation has to do with changing our relationship to our thoughts and feelings, but not emptying them.
You said the distraction is toxic. Do you think stress is toxic as well?
Most forms of stress are toxic. There may be certain kinds of mild to moderate forms of stress that could be energizing and health promoting. But I would say, particularly if it's accumulated over time, most forms of stress are toxic.
Thank you, Richard, very much.